Right, so we would like to continue with the introductory part of our course. We've been exploring the various uh, approaches to medical ethics, which is an essential component of our healthcare law and ethics model. So we would now like to delve into what we call the principlism. Principlism, which is uh, a very important framework or approach in bioethics and medical ethics, as it provides a useful, practical uh, way for providing analysis of various ethical problems which come up in healthcare delivery or medical practice. And it's so pragmatic in the sense that it seeks to leverage on four core ethical principles, and that is, respect for autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, justice, and so on. Yeah. And what is the origin? We have leading proponents called the Beauchamp and Childress. Uh, Beauchamp and Childress, what they did was that in 1979, they published their opus or their work titled Principles of Biomedical Ethics. And since 1979, it has been revised consistently. So as we speak, now we have, I think, the ninth edition of that work. And what they did was to try and find out in the various ethical scenarios, various ethical dilemmas in which there are a number of computing options regarding what should be done or what should not be done. How do we navigate that? Well, as we have noted from our earlier seminar tonight, various approaches exist to medical ethics. We talk about deontology, we talk about Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative. We've also talked about consequentialism, utilitarianism, egoistic or ethics, virtue ethics. Now, within the context of all these diverse ethical frameworks, it was the conviction of the authors of Principles of Biomedical Ethics, that is, Beauchamp and Childress, that we can identify common moral grounds by appealing to principles that are widely acknowledged across diverse ethical systems. That despite the fact that we have multiplicity or diversity of ethical systems or frameworks, it is still possible to be able to distill, to be able to extract common thread or strand which run through some of these diverse ethical systems. And that should provide a very unified prism, unified approach for doing ethical analysis in any situation. And that is what we call principlism. Principlism. And The principlism, as I have said, is an attempt to try and extract common moral ground from the various ethical systems. So principlism then is an ethical decision-making framework based on four prima facie moral principles. Prima facie moral principle in the sense that, those of you who are lawyers or have legal background, in law, when we say something is a prima facie, that is to say that in absence of a rebuttal, in absence of any countervailing point, then that is taken as the true position, or is taken as established. So that's why I say they are, if you like, a prima facie moral principle. That is to say that in absence of other uh, mitigating factors, other countervailing or counteracting factors or counterfactual situations, then those principles will have to stand and will dictate how a situation is resolved. So what are these? Respect for autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, and then justice. The point to note is that this principlism, respect for autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, justice, they are not ranked in any particular hierarchical order. That is to say that we cannot just say that maybe beneficence is more important than respect for autonomy, or respect for autonomy is more important than justice, or justice is more important than non-maleficence. No, they are not necessarily arranged in any particular hierarchical order. So let's keep that in mind. In any situation, we need to do the requisite moral deliberation, calibrations, and then balancing. Now, within the context of medicine or healthcare, the principlism are intended to guide action, if you like, they are action guides in clinical and biomedical settings. And they are not necessarily a comprehensive moral theory, so to speak. So let's keep that in mind. So we would like to expatiate each of these components of principlism. That is the four principles. So let's take respect for autonomy, for example. Professor Pong. Wow. Hello, Prof. Yes. I'm teaching online, you know. When I finish, all right, thank you. Sorry for the interruption. Then I have a scheduled appointment with a friend professor from Canada who's traveling back tomorrow. Good. So I was making the point that we need to explain each of these four principles, and we are starting with respect for autonomy. So individuals have the right to make decisions about their own lives and bodies, free from coercion or undue influence. The word autonomy, it can be disambiguated. No, it means self-rule or self-govern, autonomy, self-rule or self-govern, as it were. And for that matter, when it comes to decisions concerning the body of the patient, concerning the life of the patient, the patient should be permitted to make the necessary decisions, and the patient should not be subjected to any coercion or any undue influence. And our respect for autonomy actually provides basis in healthcare for such things as informed consent. We come and talk about informed consent in the course of this course. Informed consent, the principle that before a person will be said to have properly consented to a particular medical procedure, diagnosis, or treatment, he or she should be given the requisite information, which will enable him or her to make the right decision as whether he or she would like to undergo the said procedure or not. Then it is imperative to also appreciate that respect for autonomy is a justification for refusal of treatment. A patient can refuse treatment. Maybe a certain treatment may be needed. The patient will say that, well, despite the fact that if I don't go through this procedure or this treatment, it could, for example, complicate my life or shorten my life or whatever. The patient will say that I'm still refusing it. Now, that will have to be respected on basis of respect for what? Autonomy. So let's keep that in mind. Again, it's provide the basis for confidentiality. Respect for autonomy provides the basis for confidentiality. Confidentiality, the idea or the principle that information which have been made available by the patient in circumstances which require that the patient expected that the information was being given under privileged condition, and then it will not be diverged to third parties except in accordance with requirements of the law, then such information should be kept confidential. So, for example, a patient has been diagnosed having HIV or particular STI, sexual transmitted infection, as it were. Unless the patient himself or herself goes about telling people, confidentiality required that you're not supposed to do or to divert it. Again, respect for autonomy in law underpins certain rights, such as bodily integrity and the right to privacy. If we look at the Article 18 of the Constitution, for example, it talks, among other things, about the right to what? Bodily integrity, the right to privacy. A justification for that is the respect for what? Autonomy. But then we have to also appreciate that autonomy is not unassailable. There are some limitations. Autonomy may be restricted where it causes harm to others or where the patient lacks capacity. So if, for example, respect for your autonomy is going to cause harm to other people, then your respect for autonomy will be compromised or will be stepped aside. So let's keep that in mind. But then, before we can also accord you autonomy or we can respect your autonomy, it must be demonstrated that you are compos mentis. You have a sound mental capacity. So therefore, if mentally you are not sound, then you cannot give a valid consent. And if you cannot give a valid consent, then what is the basis for we respecting your autonomy? Because respect for autonomy requires that you should be given the liberty to make whatever choices that you consider appropriate. So when it comes to mental illness, you notice that autonomy may be sidestepped at some times. Again, when it comes to infants or children, autonomy may not be treated in the same way as is treated for mentally sound adult, as it were. Now we also have non-maleficence. Non-maleficence reflects in the principle primum non nocere. Primum non nocere simply means that first, do no harm. Do no harm. And if we look at the Hippocratic oaths, right, the oath which the Greek philosopher and medical scientist called Hippocrates, which he put together for those who have been entrusted to him as apprentice to come and study how the art of medicine and apothecary was practiced in those days, will have to swear that they will observe certain things, and the things that they swear to observe is to avoid causing harm. So a healthcare provider must avoid causing unnecessary injury or suffering. And we notice that when we come to talk about medical malpractice, this non-maleficence also reflects in the duty to exercise what? Reasonable care. Then we also have beneficence. Beneficence, that is a do-good, and it seeks to advance the welfare of patients and contribute positively towards their health. Now, when it comes to healthcare, right, the patient has, for example, come to a clinical setting complaining about maybe headache, and you decide to do certain tests, investigation, and as you are doing it, apart from the headache, you come across some other conditions which are such that if certain steps are not taken early, over time, they may escalate and aggravate the condition of the patient. Now, despite the fact that the patient only came with a complaint of headache, you are required by beneficence, the duty to promote the welfare of the patient to also contribute positively towards the well-being of the patient, including what you have discovered. So it is not enough to observe non-maleficence. Non-maleficence says that do not cause harm, right? Don't cause harm to the patient. It is not enough. We are also supposed to advance the well-being of the patient, the beneficence. Just like when it comes to religion, like I'm familiar with the Christianity, let me use that as an example. It's not enough to avoid sin, right? You must also do good. Avoiding wrongdoing means that you just stay, as somebody say, in your corner. Then you don't do, anything which you are prohibited from doing. But then, is that enough? You must go out of your way to actively do things to also benefit people. So that's the beneficence. So it's not enough to observe non-maleficence. You must also do what? You must do good, beneficence. So it goes beyond merely avoiding harm. It includes actively helping, such as providing life-saving treatment or pain relief. So the patient came with a headache, but you've discovered some other things. Then beneficence requires that you do something good for the patient. And in that respect, beneficence may provide a justification for medical paternalism, medical paternalism or paternalistic interventions, uh, especially so where patients are vulnerable. What is paternalism? Paternalism comes from, if you go to classical knowledge, especially in the ancient Roman family. When I say ancient Roman family, I'm not talking about the Roman Catholic Church. I'm talking about the civilization which had its quarters in in Rome. Now, they used to have what they call the pater familias. The pater familias, it's like you are the head of the family, and you more or less you even control the life and death and everything of family members, the pater familias. And it's expected that you have the well-being of the family at heart. So in the same vein, we get the word paternalism. Pater. So pater in the Latin, it means like father. So behaving like a father. So it requires that you are in charge, making decisions and choices for the well-being of the patient. So that's paternalism. And that is justified by the ethical principle of what? Of beneficence, as we have seen. Particularly so when you are dealing with vulnerable patients, patients that are vulnerable, then you are required to be more beneficent. Of course, that can also conflict with autonomy because beneficence say do good. So if the healthcare professional has identified something which is really not in the interest of the patient and something will need to be done, it may also end up actually undermining the autonomy or the freedom, the liberty of the patient to make choices as he or she sees fit. So that is the other thing. So beneficence may conflict with what? Autonomy. Then we also have justice. So justice as an aspect of principlism speaks to uh, fair distribution of limited healthcare resources and also equal treatment under the law. So when it comes to healthcare, justice is important. Let me give you a typical example. Let's suppose that you have, 1,000 patients with the kidney condition and they need dialysis. But let's suppose that the dialysis machines that we have, they are just 100. But we have 1,000 patients. Only 100 can benefit. So how are you going to select the 100 from the 1,000? Then principalism with respect to justice requires you to be fair in how you manage the situation. So this includes what we call distributive justice, ensuring fair access to limited resources, like the example that I gave. But sometimes when it comes to surgery, you have a queue. You have 50 people who are in a queue. They all need a particular surgery. But uh, all the 50 cannot be done. And it will take probably about 3 years before the team doing the surgery will have been able to clear all of them. So the question is, which of the 50 should be allowed to benefit from the surgery earlier than than the rest? How do you determine that? So issues of justice comes in here. So that's what we are talking about. Of course, when it comes to how to ensure equity and even distribution of healthcare facilities, how are they distributed? The equipment, the resources. Now we have made the point that principlism are prima facie moral principles. In other words, they are binding unless they conflict with another principle. So maybe when autonomy conflicts with, let's say, beneficence, you must engage in ethical reasoning, ethical analysis, in order to determine which will prevail in that context. So are you going to let autonomy supersede beneficence or vice versa? So illustration could be that we have a competent patient. If I say competent patient, a patient who is compos mentis, who is sound in mind and is not under any coercion or duress. And the patient refuses blood transfusion on religious grounds, say that I'm probably Jehovah's Witness. Now, if we are going by the principlism principle of respecting autonomy, that will mean that once we are satisfied that this patient is competent patient, is not an infant, is an adult, he has sound mind, has the capacity to make decisions, and if he or she is saying that no, I do not want blood to be transfused. Now, autonomy, respecting autonomy requires that we have to withhold treatment. You don't have to impose the treatment on such a patient. Even though beneficence would support giving the transfusion, because beneficence will say that if the blood is not transfused, the patient may die. The patient may become terribly anemic, and that may lead to the death of the patient. So it's not prudent to withhold the transfusion. So here we see a clash between respect for autonomy and what? And beneficence. But in practice, there's flexibility. That is just like what we did in where we have a potential clash. You need to do the necessary analysis, make a determination as to which of them should be given prominence or precedence over the others. Yeah, we come and discuss this principlism substantively in the course of our other themes which we have set for ourselves. So just before I draw curtain down on the class, and we are going to move into substantive areas at our next meeting, I'm going to give you a task to do. And the task has to do with you going back to Mueller, right? Mueller, in his famous work, Medical Law and Medical Ethics, Symbiosis. I would like you to read the work, and each of you, I would like you to prepare, a presentation which will not exceed 10 minutes, okay? Which will not exceed 10 minutes. And you're supposed to upload it on the platform. You do that before Wednesday. Do that before Wednesday so that Wednesday evening, if we get space, we'll take it before Friday. We have our substantive lectures. So take note of that. In this one, I've put the material already on the platform, isn't it?
Yes, Prof.
Yes. So we will draw the curtain down here, and I'd like you to go and do the work I have assigned you. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.